Art One-on-One with Mr. Burgher.
Welcome to Art 101. I'm your pod boss, Nichole Jordan, alongside your professional artist and master educator, Mr. Burgher.
And we are coming from on location.
Yes, live.
Well,
well, not live.
We're living here, but we are in another location. Explain where we're at.
We're at the Harvest Preserve in Iowa City.
And this is, explain this spot. You're more knowledgeable about this place.
Well, yeah, the spot behind us is called the Gathering of the Stones, which you can see. And then there is also another stone circle behind us that's called the Sacred Stone Circles. And it's just it's a preserve that, I don't know how long ago it was built, but the stones actually came from Indonesia, and it's basically here to preserve the prairie. It is not smack dab in the middle of Iowa City, but kind of on the eastern edge of Iowa City. Just a beautiful location.
So we're out kind of puttering around a little bit today and decided to venture out to do our podcast on location while the weather is still nice. We came out here to talk a little bit of art, a little Art 101 with Mr. Burgher and the Pod Boss.
That's right.
So where do we start today, oh Pod Boss?
We will start with asking the art guides. Ask the art guides.
Ask the Art Guides is the longest running segment on Art 101 with Mr. Burgher, as I've said a million times. If you're paying attention, our viewers and our viewership is doing very well these days, and so if you're new or you're old to the thing, this is a returning segment where we take a look at some art oracle cards from our friends at Lawrence King Publishing, and we use this as a guide to direct our instructional conversation, I guess. And so what have the art oracles given to us this week?
They have sent us Charles and Ray Eames.
And I'm not terribly familiar with them. I do own a couple of chairs of theirs, but I'm not terribly familiar. Basically, I know they're known for design work of furniture, but other than that, I really don't know too much.
Yeah, they're just a husband and wife duo. I don't know both of them. One of them is an architect. One is a designer. Correct? Okay. I think that's what I got out of it.
I think he might be an architect. She might be an artist of some sort. But I don't really know. Like I said, I'm not terribly up on them. Other than I own a couple of chairs that are their design. But at any rate, because on these cards there are multiple paths we can take. Which path of conversation are we taking this week?
I think the life.
The life
Part of their story.
Design your days, don't plan them. Which is an interesting play on the words, to design your days rather than to plan your day.
Well, this is what, I have a group called Soulful Living, and we focus on, our biggest, guiding principle is that you want to design your day. You want to wake up and design your day. You want to wake up and be intentional about what you are going to do that day. And
so what is the difference between, in your perspective, from your line of work, what's the difference between designing your day and planning your day?
Design, I feel like you put more energy and intention behind it, where planning your day is more like, I'm going to do this activity. Designing would be like, okay, I want to feel this way today. I want to get this accomplished today. This is what's most important to me based on my goals, my hopes, my dreams. It's just a bigger, maybe a more spiritual approach to, more artistic approach and spiritual approach to living life. I think it's super important.
I like it. I like that idea of, instead of just kind of going through the day and hitting your checklist of to-dos, you're like, all right, today I'm going to, here's what we're going to do.
Well, if we're honest, like what I'll do if I'm intentional about designing my day is I'll get up, I'll do a quick meditation, and I'll pull a card for the day. Like, what's my guidance for the day? Or what do I want to get accomplished today? Or what should be my intention for the day? And then just kind of go off of that. And then kind of being intentional about, okay, this is like what is most important, but I want to do it in a way that I'm grateful and I'm present and so it's a complete different way of living. And if I do that, I mean, I've told you this a million times, if I actually take the time and do that, my days and my weeks go so much better.
And maybe that's a artistic way of, I don't know, maybe that's a more artistic way of living. I don't know. Maybe more art people, because I don't do that. I'll be honest with you. I wake up and I know, okay, I've got to be at work at this time, and I've got these things I've got to do while I've got these projects rolling, I've got these classes that I've got going today, and then, there's some prep and planning that goes along with that in the, you don't just wake up and think, oh shoot, I've got this class today, what am I going to do with 25 kindergartners?
Right.
Or whatever. But
you definitely have a more practical approach, I think, and a lot of the times this is what we have to do because we start our day so early, we end our days so late by the time we get where we're going. So I don't think there's no wrong way to do it. I just feel like life is so much easier and better if you live it intentionally and you design your day rather than. So I absolutely love that card.
So, well, kind
of going into, I mean, this place is in Iowa City, Iowa, basically. And when I was talking to you earlier, the video that I pulled up for Journey into the Archives. Did you notice how I said that correctly?
Yep, I love that.
Yeah. The video that I pulled up for Journey into the Archives was on Grant Wood.
And Grant Wood was a professor at the University of Iowa in Iowa City.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That is right. I wasn't even thinking of that piece of it. It's true.
His primary studio was a few miles down the road in Cedar Rapids, and he grew up further south and west of here, but definitely the landscape of Iowa and the city of Iowa City is a place where he called home for years as a professor and as an artist and worker, and it's definitely a place that Grant would have called home at some point in his life. So.
And he kind of traveled all over the place. He went and, I mean, it talked about a little bit, your video talked about where he was most inspired. Is that in Berlin? Where was that?
He was in Germany.
Germany?
And he did quite a bit of work there in terms of being influenced by various pieces of artwork. There was a big stained glass piece that he had brought back, or had somehow organized for it to be brought back to Iowa. And in Cedar Rapids, there's a lot of, we've been to Sioux City, which is on the complete other side of the state.
Right.
But Grant Wood has influence there, painting the corn mural. And so we've taken a look at that. The influence of, all kinds of things, whether that's cultural influences, things that he's brought from other places. But Grant Wood famously said, he was famous somebody was interviewing him and said, you could live anywhere in the world, and Iowa is as far from the art center of the world as you can probably get. You could be in New York or Paris, or where he actually studied quite a little bit too. But you could live anywhere in the world that you wanted and become more successful and be more known and have quicker access, because this was way, way before the days of the internet and those sorts of things. But he said, every great idea I ever had came to me while milking a cow, so I moved home to Iowa. And that's why Grant Wood...
Interesting.
Yeah, and again, that's, kind of a humorous, which is very much Grant Wood's way. He was very humorous. He was very kind of dry, sarcastic, Midwestern sense of humor. His sense of humor very much reminds me of what my dad's sense of humor was. Very farm boy, Iowa, southern Iowa, dry, but super funny. But you got to be smart to catch the humor because you're not going to catch it if you're just kind of just listening. You have to be a little bit more active, actively engaged with the thing to get the humor sometimes. And I think maybe that's how I am, which is why you don't laugh at my jokes all the time.
You are. You are a very good representation of that.
Yeah. Blame my family. Our Iowa roots have made me dry and whatnot. Anyway,
Stoic.
So Grant Wood and the journey into the archives. Was there anything that stuck out to you that you think that you wanted to know more about, or a story that you were really like, wow, that popped out?
Not really. Well, I mean, I guess the only interesting thing that not only, but one interesting thing I learned from there was that the piece, what is the piece with the farmer and the daughter?
American Gothic.
American Gothic. I know, I should know this, but
you should.
You were saying that it was kind of like some people were upset about it because it presented a farmer and Iowa farming in a certain way, and I don't think I knew that. It
was initially seen as a very almost like a negative, like he was making fun of Iowa farmers and things like that.
Just very like protective and territorial.
Right, and so his idea was that he was. People thought that he was making fun of Iowa farmers when he wasn't, and then when it finally went into the Art Institute of Chicago, where it is now and currently owned, it's very much an embodiment of Iowa and the Midwest. Even though it's in Chicago, in a major city, it's very much an Iowa painting, and one of the most recognized paintings in all the world. It's right up there with the Mona Lisa. When you think of art, you think of certain pieces, you think of certain artists, and Grant Wood's American Gothic is very much up there with the heavy hitters.
Well, and it's just so interesting, what made that piece popular? Just like the Mona Lisa. I mean, there was nothing really special about it. Same thing with American Gothic. I mean, not saying it's not a great piece, but what in the world was so great about it?
The interesting thing about that in particular, how they both got famous, Mona Lisa and American Gothic became famous in the same way.
Okay, fill us in.
Newspaper traffic. Okay, so let's go all the way back to the Renaissance. One thing leads to another, and in 1911, it gets stolen. Gets stolen by a security guard at the Louvre, and they steal it. They take it back to Italy, where they want it to be housed, because Leonardo da Vinci is an Italian. This is an Italian masterpiece. It needs to be in Italy. Okay. Well, it was hijacked for so long. It was thefted for so long. It was in the newspapers. There was this huge worldwide global hunt for where is the Mona Lisa, again in 1911. When that took place, it became way famous. It became hugely notorious because they tried to pin the theft on Picasso. They tried to, they were blaming all kinds of people. They were trying to figure out who had taken this artwork and where it was. Then they found it, and oh my gosh, the world was relieved. And from that point forward, Mona Lisa was so much in the newspapers and the news that it became this global, people knew it.
Right.
The same thing happened with American Gothic. It was in the newspapers. It had won this competition, and it was purchased by the Art Institute of Chicago, and it was on the front page or in the newspapers of all the... And that's where everybody got their news. There was no television.
Right.
There was no other... the only print media that was every day was where everybody got their news and everything else, which was the newspapers. And so through heavy newspaper traffic and printing it over and over again in newspapers all around the world, that's what made the Mona Lisa big. That's also what made American Gothic big. And again, like today, is it very possible that a piece of artwork is going to go into a newspaper and make you world famous? No,
Right.
never happened. But if it goes viral, if it goes, then boom, a piece of artwork or an artist could really take off by making a viral video, by making content on YouTube or TikTok or Click Clack or Bing Bong or whatever website you want to go to.
I was just going to tell you how much I enjoy, like I love your stories. Like, this is
Except the Click Clack and Bing Bong.
Yeah, except for when you go on a tangent like you just did, and then you bring me back down. No, I love that story. That's so interesting that's how they both became, and the fact that I brought those both up.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Isn't that just, that wasn't necessarily by plan.
No.
That was just by, grand design.
Yes. Or divine intervention.
Divine intervention. Divine design.
That's what
I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Divine design. Good job. You're following the inspiration of our card.
We're doing what we got to do. And where would that fit on the scale? We've talked about the scale.
It was interesting information. You were at that point. You were well spoken. Like you're
well spoken, as opposed to
you didn't have as low of a voice as you do now, for sure. But
that happens with age and I don't know, V8 juice.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I would give it. I mean, I would give it a high rating just for. You're pretty consistent when I go back, except for your original video.
The first, I told you, I never pulled any punches.
Did someone go back and watch that and how awful it was? Please, just post about it. I mean, give him crap about it, because it was awful.
I pulled no punches in admitting that those first videos were absolute disasters, but
you live and you learn.
You gotta start and expect for things to be
I don't know. I probably would have put a little more behind the scenes work into
I didn't have a lot of technology, and you probably would not believe if I told you that it took me literally one day to make that video.
I would believe it.
Start to finish.
Especially I got when home, you did your close-ups.
I got home from work, and I'm like, I'm making a video today, and then snapped it all together.
Busted one out in a day.
It wasn't even like a full day. It was like an evening.
Oh.
So it was like, I put 3 or 4 hours into it. Good enough. Yeah. Now, I mean, shoot. Just to film it takes 3 or 4 hours. Well, maybe not. So on the rating...
on the rating, I'll give it like a 7.5 because...
7.5? Not bad.
I mean, Grant Wood... It's interesting that he became so popular, just being that he was a Midwest and really, I feel like his artwork, and you're probably going to correct me on this, but it was very it was farms and Midwest landscapes.
Well, he was an American regionalist.
Okay.
And so the topic that he was making was of very much everyday life in a certain region. Thomas Hart Benton, as we've talked about him before, did the exact same thing in Missouri. There were artists from Kansas that would do this. There were artists from Minnesota that would do this. There are artists from all over the place, all over the Midwest, that would do this sort of thing where they would focus on their geography and the traditions of what it was to be a person from there at that time.
Yeah.
So, and that's what the American regionalists did. To some degree, Edward Hopper did that, except in New York and in the city. But
where is he on, or where would he be on your scale of artists, like as far as liking his work? Just out of curiosity.
Grant Wood?
Yeah.
Grant Wood is very influential to anybody from Iowa in that he's an Iowa artist that made it. He was an Iowa artist that was like, I can live, and this is in the 1930s.
Right.
I can live in Iowa and I can, become successful in the art scene. And you got to give him respect for being able to pull it off. But again, his skill was off the charts, and he was able to do some things that just not anybody could do. And you have to give him, I give him a lot of respect as a human being for, number one, being committed to his art, being committed to what he was doing, but also the sacrifices of his life to live the type of life that he wanted to live, even though, he couldn't really live the way he in his heart wanted to because of social stigmas and people didn't, the LGBTQ community until very, very recently in our time, I mean, they were ostracized if they were out in the open. They were condemned. They were looked down upon. They were, like Mark Hogan Camp. I mean, that didn't happen 1,000 years ago. I mean, that happened within our lifetime that Mark Hogan Camp, we talked about him last week, was brutally attacked and nearly killed for women, for admitting to wearing women's clothes or women's shoes, not even doing anything,
obscure or
right
out in public. He
was just talking about what he liked, and he got almost killed. So could you imagine if you came out and said, "Oh yeah, I like this, that, or the other thing"? But
he didn't, did he? Because he was married and his mom.
He never came out in the open and said anything. He made a few pieces of artwork. He did a couple of things that were perceived a certain way, but never was he open about himself.
And his mom pre-arranged a wedding for him, correct? Just to make sure.
His wife was arranged by his mom, and his sister, for her entire life, his sister Nan, suppressed the stories of him and his sexual orientation. And
so when did that all come out?
It wasn't until after she had died. And
his mom or his sister?
His sister.
His sister, okay.
And then it slowly came out, and it has slowly, people have slowly put pieces together, and which is why, art history and art historians have a really, really hard job. You got to find journals and entries and writings and artworks and interpret and put things together, and eventually you put enough pieces of the puzzle together, you get a idea.
It made me think, we talked a little bit about maybe focusing on some artists that stayed true to their roots. Have you done that yet?
I have not. I think that might be maybe a little bit more toward the end of the year, like November, December. Something like that might come out, but we'll see what happens.
Off the top of your head, how many can you think of that you would put in there?
I have a list.
Oh, well, of course you have a list.
I have a list. So I'm not going to spoil the list.
Oh, okay.
But I will say that Grant Wood is on the list.
Okay. Makes sense.
But there are several artists that we have talked about that are on the list. But I'm not going to spoil the list. And to be honest with you, off the top of my head, I don't know the whole list.
Well, I know. That's why I was asking you for some of them. That's okay if you want to keep everybody at bay.
Yeah. Well, I don't. When I'm done talking, I'm done.
Yeah.
When I want to talk, I'll talk. I'll talk till the.
Which is most of the time.
I'll talk till the sun goes down. But today, I'm done talking about that topic.
Okay.
Move on.
Move on to the video from this past week. Which...
Giacometti.
Yes. Antonio?
Alberto. It starts with an A. Alberto Giacometti.
Just kidding.
Alberto Giacometti is a very, probably the greatest sculptor of the 20th century in terms of his influence and his influence on other things.
His art is at the very opposite end of the spectrum, in my opinion. Like his paintings are very dark and very.
Yeah.
What's the word? What is it? Surrealism?
He does some surrealistic things. He was a member of the Surrealist movement till they kicked him out in 1935. But yeah, I mean, he's a great artist, and I think sometimes he's overlooked and underappreciated for his influence and the impact that he's had on art and the contemporary art that's out there today.
Why do you say that?
I think that a lot of times, you go to the big names, and you just stick there. You know, people go to Picasso. We like in this collection of pods that we've created, podcasts. How many times does Giacometti's name get brought up, and how many times we talked about Picasso or Van Gogh, or like we talk about the same people oftentimes over and over again because I bring them up because those folks are going to know that example. They know who Picasso is. Right. So it's easy to use him. It's easy to talk about who's Vincent van Gogh? Oh, yeah, you know Vincent van Gogh. You've heard that story. So it's easy to springboard from one topic into that and use that as the example because people automatically, they click with that. Whereas Giacometti is a lesser known. He was this very famous, very wealthy artist. And then, you know, he just decides, hey,
he took off 10 years.
Well, that was early in his career because he wasn't finding success. But
yeah, he's very self-critical.
But he very self-critical. But at the end of his career, he's like, you know, super wealthy, but living like he's homeless because he wanted to keep that drive. He wanted to keep that fire. Very much. I use the analogy of the Rocky movies. You know, when Rocky is coming up, he's living in poverty. He thinks that this is keeping him down, but then he finally makes it big, gets wealthy, and he buys the big house. He buys the things. He gets soft because of his life. He doesn't have to fight for survival. Survival becomes very easy. Where then he realizes that easy life has not made him as hungry as he once was. He can't beat Mr. T living in a mansion. He's got to get to the roots. He's got to get in the dirt. He's got to get the sweat. He can't have the stuff going on. He can't have a circus around him, and in the Lamborghini and the this and the that. He's got to.
Yes. So anyway. Giacometti puts himself more into the starving artist, or back into the starving artist.
He knew that if he made his life easier, he was going to become soft. He was going to lose that edge.
Motivation.
And so in order to keep himself sharp, to keep that steel, sharpening steel, he stayed in the poverty that he was accustomed to. He didn't want to change the formula.
He didn't stay in the poverty.
Yes, he did.
I mean, how can you do that? If you're wealthy and how can you stay in the poverty?
Because he stayed living in the same house. He stayed living in the same conditions. I mean, he had money. He could do things. He had the ability.
He could portray that starving artist.
He could afford to do anything that he wanted to do, but he just chose to do it living in very, very meager conditions. Right. He didn't buy nice furniture. He didn't buy, a nice heating system. He didn't buy a toilet for his bathroom. He just kept doing the same thing that he was doing. So that's what he did. So hopefully people will check out that video, or if you haven't already, on Giacometti. And because he was very influential, and the things that he was doing were very influential. And
highlights of Giacometti, because you say that we don't ever focus on him. So, I mean, here's your chance. What was so great about him?
Again, I think it's just that drive to continuously improve himself, and not let his wealth, not let his stance, not let his position in the art world go to his head. He wasn't going to use that to, for his own benefit. He was just like a real dude.
Well, I almost feel like maybe that also contributed to his self-criticism, if you ask. I mean, if we're being honest.
Maybe.
That probably was part of, he felt like he belonged there.
Maybe. Well, maybe.
That was in his comfort zone.
And I think that, sometimes your position, where you're at in life, changes your personality. And I think that sometimes when you get comfortable in life, your perspective changes and you change.
Right.
And unfortunately, I have seen people, I know people who have gone from living in a state of poverty, living in a state of hunger for survival. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. And then they get better, and then they achieve that. They get that big paycheck. They get that big payday. They get that notoriety. They get that title in front of their name. And then they're like,
Yeah.
I'm going to change who I am now. Now that I have that, now that I get this respect, now I can be an asshole. Now I can afford to do what I want to do, and then your true colors come out, and you can take advantage of people and do things to people. And Giacometti did not do that. He's like, yeah, I'm a prominent artist. I'm world famous, and I can go and do what I want, but I'm still going to stay true to who I am and where I'm from, or where he thinks he's from. And that made his art true and pure, and that's what he felt like. I believe that he felt like that was the secret sauce to being able to make the type of artwork that he did. And he wasn't going to mess with the formula just because he had some.
So he was not a surrealist for very long. What else did he dabble in then? Or what was he primarily known for?
Cubism a little bit, but more of an influencer than a member of Cubism. But he did a lot of his own thing. You know, he made the kind of artwork that he wanted, which is why he got thrown out of the Surrealist movement. He refused to
conform to what?
Right, exactly. He refused to conform to their standard or expectation of what their art should be, or what art should be. They believed art should be, and then he's like, "No, I'm done. I'm out. If you're not going to let me do what I do, then I'm just going to go about my business." And he was okay with not being a part of that thing. And he just did his own thing.
Was most of his work very dark? Like, even his sculptures would seem like very...
A lot of
dark is the right word.
A lot of portraiture, a lot of images of people, whether you're talking about paintings or sculptures, a lot of influence of people, but people that he knew. Very much like Chuck Close. Chuck Close was also very much this way. He wanted to make creations of people that he knew, people that were in his life, you know, the women in his life, his brother, his friends, you know, people that he actually knew. And also there were instances of, you know, somebody with an interesting look or a pretty face or a whatever. I want you. And, you know, there are people that he would single out and say, you know, you're a beautiful person. I want you to sit so I can paint your picture. But he would just be tortured through it. He would, based on the accounts of the way he worked, he would, you know, start working on the painting or the sculpture or whatever it was, and then he would just be like, oh my God, this is such dog shit. And then he'd just then the next day come back and he'd just kind of start over and just kind of paint over what he had started. And you see this work, this reworking and reworking and reworking over the top of these images, because he was just like, but that rework became a calling card, and that's made his work stand out as different and unique, even though for him it was torture, but for us it's beautiful artwork. So
what did he do for the 10 years, you know?
He still made artwork, he just wasn't showing. I mean, taking the time off is kind of in quotes, because he did continue to work and study. He just wasn't trying to get into shows. He just wasn't as focused on it as he might have been otherwise. So taking the time off is kind of loose, you know.
Got it.
So hopefully today we were able to accomplish, if nothing else, the simple goal of talking about some artwork, looking at perspective of how artists work, but also these awesome grounds, and hopefully people can take that away today and just be at peace. And so, you know, maybe we'll end the way we began, just a couple of parting shots of just the peace and tranquility of the space that we're here. So hopefully folks will be able to find us all over social media and do all of those things. And we'll just leave them with a couple of parting shots of the property here. What do you call it?
The Harvest Preserve.
The Harvest Preserve in Iowa City.
Check it out. Go onto the internet and check it out. It's like $10 to get in for the day here, and you just hike around. You have beautiful sculptures, beautiful stone circles. It's a very healing, spiritual place, and you would never know it's here.
So we'll cut. We'll just have a couple of things, and then we'll do the credits at the end, and that'll be it. That'll be it. Voila!
All right.
Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy that.